Science!
Welcome to part 4 of Humanity in Space. Last time I talked about the history of space stations and looked at some of the science and technology that went into the Russian Salyut and Mir space station programs, and also the first American space station, Skylab. All of these and more were stepping stones towards our current space station orbiting the Earth, the International Space Station. The ISS is a space environment research laboratory that's also capable of keeping humans alive in space for prolonged periods of time and is suited for testing of equipment required for missions to the Moon and Mars. The station maintains an average orbit of 250 miles above the Earth by utilizing the engines housed in the Zvezda module and also visiting spacecraft. The ISS orbits the Earth every 92 minutes, making almost 16 trips around the planet every single day. The station took 10 years and more than 30 missions to assemble, and the end result is a stunning scientific and engineering achievement. The idea for the station began to form thanks to the State of the Union address from President Ronald Reagan in 1984.
We can follow our dreams to distant stars, living and working in space for peaceful economic and scientific gain. Tonight, I am directing NASA to develop a permanently manned space station and to do it within a decade.
Since this project became a true international endeavor, the components for the space station were made in various countries around the world. The first module of the International Space Station was Zarya, and it was launched in November of 1998. This module would provide propulsion, attitude control, communications, and electrical power, but lacked long-term life support functions. 2 weeks later, the passive NASA module Unity was launched aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour and attached to Zarya by astronauts during EVAs. At this time, the Russian space station Mir was still inhabited and the ISS remained uncrewed for 2 more years. Then in July of 2000, the Russian module Zvezda was launched into orbit. This was actually originally manufactured for the Mir 2 project, but that was never launched, so it instead became the ISS service module. Once Zvezda rendezvoused and docked with the Zarya Unity vehicle already orbiting in space, Zarya transferred all the computer control to Zvezda module. This new module added sleeping quarters, a toilet, kitchen, oxygen generators, exercise equipment, and voice and television communications with mission control. With the newly permanent habitat in full operation, Expedition 1 arrived in 2000 on the Soyuz TM-31. The commander of the mission was NASA astronaut Bill Shepard, who had been to space 3 times before on space shuttle missions. Joining him was Russian cosmonauts Yuri Gudzenko and Sergei Krikalev, both who had lived and worked on Mir. The station continued to expand, and while Expedition 1 spent 136 days on the ISS, the space shuttle brought up segments of the station's integrated truss structure, which would be 110 meters in length once completed and provide the station with additional attitude support and supplement solar arrays. Over the next 2 years, more pieces were added to the station, including the Pirs docking compartment, which provided a docking port for the Soyuz. In 2002, the space shuttles Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour delivered the Destiny laboratory module, as well as the Quest airlock module, where astronauts used to camp out before spacewalks. Destiny continues to be the primary research laboratory on the ISS. The module has a 20-inch optically pure telescope-quality glass window used for Earth science observations. Imagery captured from Destiny's window has given geologists and meteorologists the chance to study the Earth and ocean events like never before. The capabilities of photo capture were greatly improved with the help of NASA astronaut Don Pettit, who constructed and installed a barn door tracker to compensate for the movement of the ISS relative to the Earth's surface, permitting sharper, high-resolution images. The station's main robotic arm, the Canadarm2, was installed as well, an upgrade from the same type of arm found on the space shuttle. Speaking of astronaut Don Pettit, he was the first to use the Canadarm2 to capture a visiting spacecraft, and he remembered doing so in an interview on our podcast.
Catching the first commercial spacecraft with a robotic arm, I spent a heap of time practicing because I wasn't going to have the future of commercial space get muffed up because of my inabilities to fly the robotic arm. So I spent a lot of time practicing in all different scenarios. There were some questions for the SpaceX vehicle in terms of what its deadbands were for its yaw, pitch, and roll. So it could have been a bucking bronco that I would have had to have flown the robotic arm trying to lasso this thing. And it turns out it turned out to be a cream puff. The SpaceX engineers, even though their deadband requirements were wider than any other vehicle that we'd captured on space station to date, their vehicle was extremely stable, and they didn't need the wide deadbands basically, because their reaction control system, coupled with their ability to stabilize the spacecraft, was really, really good. And so capturing the first Dragon turned out to be a real easy thing to do. And I didn't need all of that training, but I was prepared to capture a bucking bronco had it turned out that way.
The expansion of the station was interrupted in 2003 due to the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster. Assembly resumed in 2006, and a second and third set of solar arrays was attached to the station. Because of the added power to the station, more pressurized modules could be added, so Harmony and Columbus were attached. The Harmony module is the utility hub of the station, connecting all the laboratory modules and sleeping cabins for 4 of the 6 crew. Columbus is the largest contribution from the European Space Agency, and the laboratory can accommodate 10 active science payloads, as well as housing the Fluid Science Lab and the Biolab. The Japanese module, Kibo, was launched in 3 parts and remains to be the largest module on the International Space Station. Kibo is a science laboratory and not only contains 10 rack spaces for internal science experiments, but also 12 external ports, known as the Terrace. All experiment payloads are fully exposed to space and manipulated by the module's remote manipulator system, or a 10-meter-long robotic arm. In 2010, the Tranquility node was fully installed and the cupola was attached, the large viewing dome where the most stunning views of Earth and space can be seen. The last pressurized module, Leonardo, was installed in 2011, and as of 2019, the ISS consists of 15 pressurized modules and the integrated truss structure. Also, in 2016, the Bigelow Expandable Activity Module was installed, an experimental inflatable module. It has been carefully monitored for the last 4 years, with its protective layers intact from micrometeoroids and its performance expectations exceeding its goals. The idea is to test technologies like this to further the expansion of future stations and future space exploration. Life on the space station is a mix of daily tasks, scientific research, and station maintenance. Every single manned crew mission that goes to the International Space Station is given an expedition number, and as of this recording, there have been 60 expeditions to the ISS, most of which lasting up to about 6 months. A day on the station starts much like a day on Earth, with the crew waking up at about 6 a.m. UTC time, otherwise known as Coordinated Universal Time. Morning inspection of the station follows, then breakfast and daily planning conference with Mission Control before starting the workday at 8:10 a.m. The first scheduled exercises of the day usually follow, with more exercise and work happening after the 1-hour lunch break. In general, the crew works 10 hours per weekday, 5 hours on Saturdays, and has Sundays off, and the rest of their time they have as their own for relaxation or catching up on work. First, let's talk about hygiene, as astronauts generally start their day with the same hygiene needs as we have on Earth. Astronauts will wash their hair with a rinseless shampoo. Also, they brush their teeth and wash their face, only carefully in microgravity. When it comes to the food they eat on the station, it is mostly vacuum sealed in plastic bags. This also goes for most drinks, which are usually dehydrated powder, much like the Death Wish coffee that we actually sent up to the International Space Station to caffeinate the crew members of Expedition 56. And when I worked with NASA Food Labs to get that coffee sent to the space station, they sent us a bunch of samples of actual space food that would be sent to the astronauts. As I just mentioned, this is a pack just like the ones that were sent up to the International Space Station that contained Death Wish coffee. And all the astronauts have to do is add water through here, and then they have a special straw that they can then drink their coffee straight from this bag. NASA Food Labs also sent over a bunch of different examples of actual food that you'd find in space, some just in containers that looked like packets of nothing. This, if you can see right there, says apricot cobbler, and it even feels kind of squishy, like some apricot cobbler in there, as you can see. Also, some delicious rhubarb applesauce. That must be somebody's favorite, and they requested it on the menu, and now they can get it on the International Space Station. How about some chicken pineapple salad? Dehydrated, ready to be eaten. And as you can see, every single pack has these pieces of Velcro attached to them because the food would literally fly away from you in microgravity, and they're able to adhere it to the walls or to their actual spacesuits so it doesn't fly away from them as they eat their chicken pineapple salad. Or what about some delicious dehydrated butternut squash? We've got some dried beef right there for consumption. Some jerky in space, some space jerky. Here's a nice snack, macadamia nuts. It always makes me laugh. This is called candy-coated chocolate. Now, we all know these are M&Ms, but everybody loves delicious M&Ms when they're floating in space. They're even more delicious. The crew looks forward to the arrival of spaceships that bring care packages and fresh fruit and vegetables. Crumbs and liquids are carefully monitored because of the dangers of contaminating the station's systems. In fact, when NASA astronaut Nicole Stott was living on the ISS, one of her crewmates got his favorite pickles sent up to space, and well, let's hear her describe it.
Yeah, my crewmate Jeff, in his care package, and apparently he loved, like at the 7-Eleven, the big pickles in a bag.
Yeah, pickle in a bag.
Pickle in a bag, and it's like a huge pickle, but it's just this bag of pickle juice, too.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, honestly, we were all excited about eating the pickle, but the idea of opening it up was really kind of daunting because what do you do? I mean, who's going to suck down the pickle juice? What's going to happen with the juice? I mean, we had agreements that if you opened up a bag of food, especially if it had a sauce in it, you suck that bag dry because wet trash is really icky. And so finally Jeff decides to open this pickle and eat it. And instead of sucking down the sauce or finding somebody who would suck down the sauce, he took a towel and he just squirted out all the pickle juice into this towel. So now you have this white towel that is this greenish yellow, that fluorescent
neon,
color, greenish yellow towel that's just soaked, and hangs it up in the corner of the station or one of the modules so the airflow will dry it.
That's how you
dry. Yeah, even your towels that you use after you take a bath or when you're sweating, and all of that just has to get recycled into the systems which then generate clean drinking water from it. But anyway, he put this towel up there with the pickle juice, and it reeked. I mean, it just circulated through the station, and for days was this juice.
No.
And I remember when the way the airflow would go is it would come down through the U.S. and then it would finally make it all the way down to the other end to the Russian segment and come through. And as soon as it did the first time, I remember Gennady Podolka, who was our commander at the time, he comes floating down. Just, what is that? What is that? Like looking for whatever the source of the,
So needless to say, they probably don't
That was
send
bad.
bags of pickles up there anymore, I would think.
I don't know.
Either that or they drink the
Without
juice
even
now,
knowing
right?
it.
Yeah, please drain the juice. That's
The
crazy.
pickle was good, but the juice was.
Was it worth it in the end?
No, I don't
No.
think so.
No.
I don't think so.
Astronauts living on the ISS do have free time. One of the most sought-after things to do for an astronaut during their free time is to look out the window in the cupola. There are also games, books, musical instruments, and even movies on the space station. Think about being an astronaut living on the International Space Station and getting the chance to watch the newest Star Wars movie while orbiting the Earth. Since 2000, the International Space Station has been constantly occupied by humanity, and we have learned a lot, not only about what it takes to keep a space station running for so long, but the effects of long-term stays in space on the human body. The most extensive study to date was the astronaut twin study. In 2019, NASA reported their medical results. This one-year mission studied the health effects on long-term spaceflight on NASA astronaut Scott Kelly, who stayed 342 days on the station. Scott's identical twin Mark was here on Earth, and the compared data saw alterations in DNA and cognition of Scott Kelly in space, as well as a serious blood flow and clot problems that astronauts could face living in space. These results will be instrumental in making the mission parameters for astronauts heading to the moon and eventually to Mars. Both Russia's Roscosmos Space Agency and NASA have pledged to remain part of the ISS program until 2024, and the usability of the station as we look towards the future of the next space station around Earth could extend until 2030, thanks to the Spaceflight Act of 2018. You can spot the ISS in the night sky without the use of a telescope. There are many smartphone apps that can help you, including the NASA app and my own personal favorite, Starwalk. As we look towards the future, space exploration seems to have a bright, bright tomorrow. More space stations are being proposed for orbiting Earth, and the Gateway Station is the next project to be created in orbit around the moon, to be used as a literal gateway for astronauts from the Earth to the lunar surface. The International Space Station is an incredible crowning achievement in human history, showing our ability to create, engineer, and deploy a station that can orbit the Earth continuously as we live, work, and research in space. And with the continued success of the space station, we have also had a lot of success in the spacecraft that we have flown throughout the years, including rockets and also satellites. The most impressive of all of these has to be the Space Shuttle program. So next week, I will be looking at the history of this incredible spacecraft, how it was engineered, the science and technology behind it, the success, the failures, and ultimate end of this incredible spacecraft mission.